Yeah, so Caleb Maupin, as I said, founder of the Center for Political Innovation, author, journalist, public speaker, organizer. You know the deal. You know this man. He's incredible. Caleb Maupin. We're going to be talking about billionaires. We're going to be talking about Ukraine and Russia. We are going to be talking about an upcoming event that is very exciting that I'm going to be speaking at in Texas. That is being hosted by the Center for Political Innovation. So we got a lot that's going on. I'm very excited to talk about all of it. And without further ado, here is Caleb Maupin. Caleb, welcome to the show.
Sure, glad to be here.
Yeah, glad to have you here. And mods, if you could spam Caleb's links in the chat, that'd be awesome. That'd be incredible. Website, YouTube, all that stuff, Twitter, all that stuff. So, how you doing?
I'm great. Just enjoying a Sunday afternoon here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. It's a little bit after sundown here in New York City. So there you go. It's been a stormy winter weekend. We've had quite a bit of winter here, a lot of snow.
Yeah. I've my housemate, he just moved back to Brown. He goes to school at Brown, so he's getting the snow out there right now, and he's sending me videos of it. It looks terrible. I'm sure New York's pretty bad too. But do you like the snow though? Because I know some people like it.
No, I'm a summer kind of guy.
Okay.
You know,
Okay.
but there's some people that don't like it no matter what it is, right? When it's winter, they wish it was summer. When it's summer, they wish it was winter. I try not to be that kind of person. I try to, when it's summer, enjoy the summer. When it's winter, say
Make
I
the
like
most
summer.
of it.
Yeah. Be consistent. Don't just hate whatever's there, right?
Yeah.
Some people are like that.
There's something a bit novel as a Californian born and bred of like wearing like a long jacket, like a long coat, There's something to that. But I don't think I could ever live in the snow. No matter how much I love New York or DC, I don't think I could do it in the winter. But anyways, we started talking like this past week because I did a live stream on probably like it was right before the Cedar debate, I think. And I was discussing billionaires, and I don't even remember how it came up, but it did come up, and it was a point of controversy for some people in our community. And I don't mean to be like, like screw all the people who are like, asking questions about this, who are maybe critical about what I was saying, because I too used to have these opinions like, abolish billionaires is a good thing. This is what a real Marxist stands for, abolishing billionaires. But you actually have changed my perspective on this matter, not only through like the strength of your arguments, but through actual Marxist theory. So I mean, I wanted to bring you on to talk about this. And, we played some of your videos on the matter actually when we were discussing this. But yeah, I mean, if you could just kind of briefly, dive into this whole what the conversation is about, who's pushing this stuff, who's pushing the abolish billionaire, talking points. And that's probably a good starting point, I think. And kind of what you see to be the true what, or at least what we should hold as opinions as Marxists and, non-billionaires as to how we see not just billionaires today in the United States, but what Marxism means for creating wealth and prosperity for all people, as we continue with this project.
Well, there's a lot to unpack because people don't have any idea about any of this stuff. And we don't want to be snobs, and we don't want to sit here and go, oh, we know it and you don't. Of course, people aren't going to know it, right? In the USA, I was taught in school that communism means everyone gets paid the exact same wage, no matter how hard they work. The teacher said, look, if I just gave everyone in the class a C, that would be communism. Well, that's ridiculous. That's not what we believe. And there's so much confusion, right? People think taxes are socialism. When you go pay your taxes, well, that's socialism, right? Or, I hear there's a lot of silliness out there. So we got to learn to just patiently explain these ideas and just be very clear about them. But I think a good way to come at it is this. If you went back to like the Middle Ages when there were knights and castles, a mirror was a very rare thing. Only the ultra rich people, only like kings and queens had mirrors. So if, in the time of the Middle Ages when there were knights and castles and peasants and serfs and feudalism, if you were going around saying abolish mirrors, would that have been correct?
No.
Obviously
No.
not, right? You know, the point, mirrors aren't bad. It was bad that kings and queens and nobles had a lot of wealth and most people didn't. But mirrors themselves were not bad. In fact, you know, we would want a society where more people had access to mirrors, would we not? I mean,
Exactly.
that's kind of the point. But if you understand it, you know, the Marxist narrative of human history is that human beings, through our creativity and our brilliance, are constantly moving to a higher mode of production. We were hunter gatherers, but we invented spears and sticks and rocks, and we got so good at hunting and gathering that there was a scarcity created. You know, we were too good at hunting and gathering. So next, we moved toward, you know, feudalism and slavery. And eventually, feudalism and slavery became outmoded. Human inventions like the printing press and the Silk Road from Asia made feudalism unsustainable. So we eventually moved toward capitalism. And the problem with capitalism is that just like the systems that came before it, capitalism is holding back human creativity and holding back human productivity. So we want to get to a higher plane that has
Hmm.
even more efficiency.
Hmm.
And the goal is to eventually get to a society with so much wealth and abundance that inequality can break down. The basis of inequality is scarcity. When there's not enough for everybody, some people have and some people don't. And the
Yes.
basis of social hierarchies, the need for a government, you know, all these things are rooted in scarcity. And when there's enough to go around, inequality starts to break down. I've often used the analogy of, like, you know, like a wealthy family. You know, their kids can just go to the refrigerator and take whatever they want, right? There's no problem. But in a low income household, the parent might have to very carefully regulate what goes in and out of that refrigerator because there might not be enough for everybody else, right? And that as scarcity vanishes, then social hierarchies, inequality, and the state itself can fade away. And the goal of Marxism is to get rid of the problem with capitalism, that under capitalism, abundance creates poverty. Under all the systems of the past, people were homeless because there wasn't enough housing. People were hungry because there wasn't enough food. But capitalism is the first system in history where people are homeless because there's too much housing, where people are hungry because there's too much food. And that is the problem of capitalism. Self driving cars would be a great thing in a socialist society. It means everyone who has to make their living driving a truck or driving a car or driving a cab could do something else, and there'd be more abundance in society. But under capitalism, self-driving cars would result in millions of people being unemployed. Andrew Yang and others have talked about how dangerous self-driving cars would be, because it would lead to all the people who work as cab drivers and truck drivers and transportation workers losing their jobs. And that this is the problem of capitalism. One great analogy I've heard, or one story I've heard, they talk about the coal miner's riddle. And that there's a coal miner, and his son says to him, "Father, why is it so cold?" And the father says, "Because we can't afford any coal to heat our home with." And the boy says, "Why can't we afford any coal?" And he says, "Because I lost my job at the coal mine." And he says, "Why did you lose your job at the coal mine?" And he says, "Because there's too much coal." That's capitalism. And the computer revolution has amped up the productivity. You know, book binderies. There used to be people, you know, hundreds of people would be employed in these places called book binderies, making books all day. Now, Amazon, they have print on demand. You push a button and a book comes out, right? That's
Hmm.
hundreds of jobs eliminated. With artificial intelligence, with 3D printers, we are entering such a huge leap in technological progress. But we still have this problem that under capitalism, your only value is as a laborer. Your only value is renting yourself out to your employer. And so, as technology advances and there becomes less and less of a role for workers in the assembly line, millions of people have no place in the economy. They're left outcast and hungry. And the only way to really resolve this is for the means of production, the banks, factories, and industries, to be organized rationally and not function according to the chaos of the market or the anarchy of production. And with a rationally planned economy where we use resources in a long term, strategic, sustainable way, not just what's in the interest of private companies at the time, where we plan things out, where we determine what is needed, you could have a very prosperous society. And that society would lead to all of humanity living far wealthier than billionaires do live in our time. We can talk about the human race expanding. We can talk about space travel. We can talk about mining asteroids, right? That there's a huge amount of potential if we can get beyond the irrational capitalist system. And if you just say abolish billionaires, that cuts off that potential. It makes it sound like the problem is wealth. The problem is not wealth. The problem is profits. The problem
Hmm.
is irrational capitalist system. And with getting rid of capitalism, we can create a bunch of wealth. If all that Mao had done when he took power in China in 1949 was redistribute wealth that was already there, China would still be dirt poor.
Yeah.
If all that Stalin had done in Russia was redistribute wealth that was already there, Russia would never have been an industrial superpower that defeated the Nazis and eventually went into outer space and such, right? That socialism isn't just taking what's already there and rearranging it. So some people
Yes.
have more, it's about rational planning of the economy to advance human civilization to a higher mode of production. That's the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was actually having a conversation with someone about this last night. I was asked, like what I do for my job, and I discussed, politics, and I said, I'm a communist. And this is always like, I feel like the as you described, like what you were taught in middle school, like what is communism? People say like, oh, it means like you bring everyone down to a lower tier of a standard of living so there can be more equality, which is not true, right? And I always use China as an example because it's kind of like what Michael Parenti said about Bernie Sanders when he was asked about his friendship with Bernie Sanders. He's like, Bernie Sanders just says, tax the rich. What is that? I want the rich to stop controlling every single aspect of my life. And even further than that, I want, and this is me now saying this, I want what China has done in some regards with these incredible 5-year economic plans and these plans for lifting people in Xinjiang or Tibet or in extreme poverty out of poverty by giving them food, housing, shelter, electricity, water, clothing, education, et cetera, right? So I guess like for people who do have this idea that we should like abolish billionaires or anything like that, and think that like taxing the rich is the the method that we are going to be able to achieve like prosperity for the people. What would you say to them surrounding like what Marx had to say with like increasing industrial output, or just providing an economy that is based around the needs of the people, because that's what China's done. We have a planned economy here, I think, but it's just planned for the elites to suck us dry. So what do you have to say about that? Because I think there's just a lot of well-intentioned people who believe that, and I think, and maybe you could touch on this as well, I think it's because they see that the immense power that comes with being a billionaire in the United States today, and that rightfully outrages them. But it's not the money that's the it's not the wealth and the prosperity that's the problem, because I think we would all love to have wealth and prosperity. It's the power that comes with it for the select few in the United States right now who do have that money.
Sure. Well, there's no question that the billionaires in the United States don't pay their fair share of taxes. I think
Hmm.
they should have to pay more taxes and have a share in paying for social programs, et cetera. So I mean, I don't want to be like they're wrong in saying that, but they're missing the point, right? That socialism is not simply a taxation program,
Hmm.
right? It's not redistributing wealth. We need to lose this phrase redistribution of wealth, because that goes on in every system. Look, outside my apartment, there are streets, and those streets are paid for with money that was redistributed from me, a New York City taxpayer, to pay for those streets. And there's snowplows driving those streets right now, and those wages of those guys driving the snowplows are paid for by the taxes of people like me. Some countries redistribute a lot of wealth, some countries redistribute a little bit of wealth. We redistribute wealth to corporations by giving them corporate subsidies and tax breaks. We redistribute wealth to low-income folks in the form of of social programs, et cetera. But under every system, you're going to have some degree of wealth redistribution.
Hmm.
That doesn't make it socialism.
Hmm.
Socialism is when profits are no longer in command, when society comes together and controls the economy rationally in order to ensure unlimited growth, in order to make sure that we continue to grow. And the goal of socialism is to raise people out of poverty. It's to reach a higher mode of production, to eradicate scarcity. And if you don't want to take my word for it, go and read one of Karl Marx's most very important pamphlets called "The Critique of the Goethe Program." And in that pamphlet, he makes abundantly clear it's not about redistribution of wages. It's not about trying to establish equality in wages or in incomes. It's about, public ownership of the means of production. It's about changing property relations. And when you talk about what China has done, yes, China has, sits down and they come up with this 5-year plan. And they have state-run banks and they have state-run industries, and even the private companies are basically controlled by the government. The government has the ability to kind of control the private companies and force them to do what is in the interest of society at large. And as a result, they haven't had this boom bust cycle that we have in the United States of every 5 or 6 years the economy crashes because of the irrational capitalist system. And now, because of the computer revolution, we're living in a long-term economic crisis. They're not having this problem in China. Technology advances and society gets wealthier because they've overcome that. Now, I think a lot of this confusion has to do with the fact that the Russian Revolution, the first socialist revolution, it happened in a very poor country. Russia was very poor at the time they had the revolution. Cuba was very poor at the time of their revolution. Vietnam and in China was very poor back in 1949. And when it became clear there wasn't going to be a socialist revolution in like the United States or France or Germany or someplace like that, and these socialist countries were barricaded during the Cold War and they were surrounded, a lot of them fell into the trap of thinking, okay, maybe we're not at the level of wealth that they have in the West, but we can try to build a more equal society in poverty. And Che Guevara, he made that mistake, and his economic policies in Cuba. Che Guevara was very heroic all across South America, fighting imperialism and mobilizing the peasantry. But when he was running the Cuban economy and trying to run it on the basis of, this kind of, without material incentives, he called it, where people would just kind of work voluntarily, it didn't work very well. And the Cultural Revolution in China was also a disaster because they tried to do that. And in the final years of Stalin's life, there were some attempts to make the Soviet Union more, totally egalitarian, and it didn't work out too well. And that trying to, build equality in a state of scarcity is a recipe for disaster. It absolutely is a recipe for disaster. And China found their way out of that. And that's why China has been so successful, is that, starting in 1978, they allowed a market sector to exist. They allowed people to start their own businesses, but they controlled it and forced those businesses to do what was in the interest of all of society. And Cuba is moving in that direction. And North Korea would like to be like that. Vietnam, they called their economy, they call it the socialist-oriented market economy. And you should read what the World Business Forum has said about it. It's hugely successful because they invest in infrastructure, they control the private corporations and make them do what's in the interest of the country. It's socialism because it's not profits in command. Profits are not in command. You have a government, with that's represented by a political party that has millions of members and such controlling the economy. But you have a market sector to allow foreign investment to come in, to allow growth. It's a better model. And the Soviet Union, unfortunately, they needed to adjust their economy to be more like that. And they weren't able to do so. And the result was the Soviet Union falling. So there's an element of truth. If you try to redistribute poverty, and if you're in a state of scarcity and poverty, and you try to make everyone absolutely equal, that's going to be a disaster. Because at the end of the day, some people are going to be able to work harder than others. And you're also going to need people that are like the government, that are like the bureaucracy, right? If there's a shortage of food and you're going to have to ration the food, there's going to be a line of people waiting to get that food. And there's going to be a guard who's going to guard that line. And he's going to demand a bigger slice of food for taking on the responsibility of running that, being the guard. So because of that, you're going to have bureaucracy, and socialist countries have had to deal with the problem of bureaucracy. So again, the road to creating a classless, stateless, egalitarian society is abundance. And thinking that we can do that in poverty, just kind of appealing to people's goodwill or something, is really a recipe for disaster. Marx makes that clear in the Goethe program. Deng Xiaoping made that clear in his critique of the Gang of Four and the Cultural Revolution. And this is how 21st century socialism operates. This is what, the more advanced and modern socialist countries are thinking about right now.
Yeah. I totally agree with you. And you actually, Haas, 1 second. You actually phrase it much better than I did, because I was kind of trying to say like, you need to work, you need to defeat the system. You're not going to defeat the system and create some new order that is going to be an economic system that works in the interests of the working class and the overwhelming majority of the people just by taxing the rich. Although I do think it's a needed measure. Special guest, Haas, you want to come say hi real quick?
Yeah, sure. Hey.
Caleb's on the stream. He just got back from the
Hey,
gym.
what's up?
Hey, how are you? Good to see you.
You too, yeah.
Well, what's new?
You want to say hi?
Yeah, hey, what's up? What's up,
Wow,
everybody?
you guys are in the same house, huh?
Yeah, I had to leave my luggage here for a sec, but
All right. Good to see
how's
you.
everybody doing? Wow, let me see those gorillas and sons.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Where are you headed right now?
I'm gonna check into the
Okay,
place I got. Yeah, probably take a nap or something.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Good stuff.
All right, see you
I'll
later,
catch
man.
you later.
Yeah, for sure.
Peace.
All right. Shout out to Infrared. That's great.
Yeah, we got all the sun gorillas in the chat right now.
All right.
Yeah, no. I mean, I hope Paz can come out to Texas with us. We're gonna have to talk about that.
That'll be a mega event. Yeah, it's going to be great.
Well, let's actually talk about that. Let's shift gears. This is going to be very exciting. Big event happening in Texas. I'm going to be speaking there. It's going to be. I'm so excited for this. Why don't you talk about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, it'll be formally announced in 2 days, but why not talk about it here on the stream? March 12th in Austin, Texas, we've rented a hotel there. Details to come. We'll be having a big event, and the theme of the event will be Free America from the Neoliberal Empire. And it'll be a little patriotic socialist indoor rally. And Jackson Hinkle and I will be giving the keynote. It's going to be great. We're going to have some musicians. We're going to have different speakers. It's going to be a lovely evening. So I hope people can come out and join us. Mark your calendar. March 12th in Austin, Texas, and it's going to be awesome. And the Center for Political Innovation is growing right now. People are signing up across the country. We have our weekly Zooms. We have an organizing committee in California. We've got one in the Pacific Northwest, Seattle, Portland, Oregon. We got people in Chicago. We've got people in Massachusetts and in the DC area. I mean, it's really growing, and it's very, very exciting because people are ready for this. We are filling a void. A lot of people are disgusted by the synthetic, pro-war, pro-imperialist, toxic cancel culture, synthetic left. A lot of people can't stand them. But also a lot of people are sick of capitalism. They're sick of greed is good economics and the idea that, that some people just deserve to be poor and this anti-communism and this right-wing stuff. And we are filling the void. We're giving people what they really need, which is an optimistic, constructive socialist message. We want to make a better country. We want to, bring people together and make sure people have jobs, healthcare, and education. People are hungry for this, and we are providing it. And every day I meet people that are ready for this.
Yeah, I think it's going to be great. I'm really excited for it. I'm going to be out there. I was already, it was just so crazy. The timing worked out beautifully. I was going to be out in Texas. There's a UFC event, UFC 271 that's going to be going on then. I think Joe Rogan is going to be announcing. And I've always wanted to talk to people like Joe Rogan or people like Sagar and Jetty, if not on a formal broadcast, but like just, colloquially, like, in person or whatever, because I feel like, and this kind of leads us into the next discussion point. I feel like there's a lot of, why do you think there's so much anti-China sentiment that is infiltrated these like populist circles? Like you see, I mean, Tucker Carlson is better than most on a lot of actually foreign policy issues. We're going to be reacting to a video here after our discussion that was fully just released with Jimmy Dore, and I was blown away by the discussion they had and how much they agreed on. And I don't know. I just see people going on Joe Rogan's show and they posture, and they do talk a lot like populists, and they speak to the needs of a lot of working class people here and a lot of people in this country. But then they have this like rabid anti-China sentiment. They sound like George Soros or like Chuck Schumer or Nancy Pelosi or something like that. What is this? Why do you think that this has infiltrated these circles so heavily?
Well, I think it's easier to blame China than the billionaires that run this country. And that if you blame China, you can get a lot of support. There's a lot of money in hating China.
Mm-hmm.
Look, the Falun Gong that run Epic Times, this crazy religious cult, they have lots of funding and money, and they will put money behind anyone who says anything negative about China. Okay. China's a competitor. Let's be real. They have the biggest telecommunications manufacturer in the world. Yeah. Huawei technology makes way better phones than Apple does, way better phones. and they last longer. And so Apple wants Huawei put out of business, and they've gone around the world demanding countries not hire Huawei to run their telecommunications manufacturer. Instead, they should, work with the United States and have the cell phone companies that work with the NSA and give them backdoors to tap people's phones running things. China's a competitor. I think that's part of it. But the other thing is that, China, like I said, that when people are in a state of poverty, that kind of leads to more authoritarianism. And that, the country, they just eradicated extreme poverty, but they have been pulling themselves up by their bootstraps for a long time. And there's a lot of parts of China that, okay, they've eradicated extreme poverty, but people are still coming up. I mean, they've come up from almost nothing to being the second largest economy in the world. Huge successes, but in the conditions they're in, they're not going to have the level of free speech that we have here in the United States. They're not going to have the level of freedom of association and such. And I think people don't quite understand that they're in different circumstances.
Yes.
And they've made abundantly clear they have no desire to export their system. Right. And they have a lot of countries that are friendly to them and aligned with them that have completely different political and economic systems. They have no desire to export their system to the United States, to any other country. So people who say, oh, we're going to be living under China, they don't. I've seen Tim Pool talk that way. They have no idea what they're talking about. China calls their system socialism with Chinese characteristics, meaning it is specific for China.
Mm-hmm.
They know that it wouldn't work in any other country. And even in China, they're constantly adjusting it and changing it. So I think there's a lot of confusion around that. But look, China is culturally very different than the United States. It's a country that's been around for 5,000 years, long traditions, a lot of different ethnic groups, and a lot of history there. And the way they view the world is very different than the way we view the world here in the United States. So their culture is different. So because they're different, it's easier to demonize them. Right? It's easier to play on people's ignorance and fears. And I think that's what's going on more than anything.
Yeah. And I guess, and maybe, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but the way I look at China is like, and the concerns that are raised surrounding, like, say, freedom of speech, those freedom of assembly, whatever, those sorts of issues. I guess what I have to say about it is, and this is a Westerner's perspective who've never been to China. I don't know people from China, but what I've come to think of the situation is that, I mean, let's just say everyone in this chat right here watching the stream right now knows how absolutely evil George Soros is. The people like Mike Pompeo, the heart of the deep state, who want to wage war all across this globe and send like all of our brothers and sisters out into these wars to fight these wars so he and his friends can get rich. They know how evil these people are. They know how evil Pelosi, Biden are, et cetera, et cetera. And China is, as you said, a great, not a military threat. They're not threatening us, but they are, they are surpassing us already in certain aspects in terms of economic growth. And, the elites in America are worried by that because they don't want to work with China. They want to stifle China's economic growth. So they're doing anything and everything they can to try and destabilize their country. And China, is doing what they can to prevent that from happening. And sometimes that means doing things that we're not really, I guess we wouldn't be acquainted to here in the United States because we don't have any major superpowers doing those things to us, those destabilization efforts. So I don't know. Is that kind of how you feel about some of this stuff? Obviously, some of it, you'll see the stories and it's laughable what we've seen, with censorship and stuff like this, some of these stories. But at the heart of it, I think we all really know what's happening. They're trying to protect themselves and their economy from very, very evil people that Americans already know are evil.
Well, sure. And one thing I will say is that, that there's one aspect of U.S. society is the hypocrisy.
Mm-hmm.
All right. In China, everyone knows the Chinese Communist Party is in charge. Their constitution says we believe in communism. We are striving to build communism. The Communist Party is in charge. It's leading people toward communism. Everybody knows that, right? And that's kind of how it works. But here in the United States, we're just supposed to be the land of the free and the home of the brave. And our government has no agenda. And our government just does what the people want. And it's just, and that's all malarkey. Look, at the end of the day, in the United States, for example, right? If the government wants to lock you up and go after you, they can.
Yes.
Now, there's a chance that if you're wealthy enough and well-connected enough, or, if it'll be too much trouble for the government or whatever, you might be able to get out of it. But beyond that, forget it. I mean, the conviction rate in our courts, first of all, very few people go to trial in the United States. Like 99% of cases never even go to trial. And those who do go to trial, the conviction rates are massive. You know, here in New York City, in the Bronx, in the borough of the Bronx, they have the lowest conviction rate in the entire country. And you know what it is? It's 2/3. 2/3 of the people who go on trial in the Bronx get convicted, and that's the lowest in the country. In federal courts, it's like 95% of people that go on trial get convicted.
Wow.
And if you keep in mind that most people don't even go to trial. So if someone's going to go to trial, something's off, right? Maybe they're wealthy enough, or maybe they didn't do it or whatever. But if somebody's going to go to trial, that's the great anomaly, because nobody goes to trial. But even then, the conviction rates are through the roof, meaning you go to trial, you're most likely going to be convicted. But we pretend it's something else. There's all these cop shows that make it look like we let people off on technicalities all the time, and that
Yes.
everything is dressed up. I mean,
Yes.
look, our mainstream media never pushes an ideology. They just give us the facts, right? Well, in China, everybody knows that the media is in line with the Communist Party and is supporting their agenda. But here in the United States, they just tell us the truth, right? And we believe in free speech, except for people like Julian Assange. I mean, this is how ridiculous it is. And I get frustrated by that, because at the end of the day, right? I mean, there are going to be some people who run the government and some people who don't. And as long as you have a society where there is scarcity, there's going to be some level of authoritarianism. The way to break down authoritarianism, the way to break down inequality, the way to have a more free and open society is to raise the level of productive forces. And you'll notice that China, as they have developed, has become more free and open. Now, there's a lot more religious freedom now in China than there used to be. There's a lot more freedom of speech with social media and such than there used to be. I mean, obviously, any Chinese person, representing the government that I've ever spoken to has always said, we want to improve on human rights. There are some real problems that we acknowledge we have. But first of all, they acknowledge they have them, which U.S. leaders never do, number one. And number two, they would like to improve them. And part of improving them is building a more stable society. In any society, the level of freedom of speech is going to be based on stability. There's a Supreme Court ruling in, I believe, 1967 or 68. It was called Brandenburg versus Ohio. It is one of the strangest Supreme Court rulings ever. And it was a guy in Ohio, Charles Brandenburg, who was a member of the Ku Klux Klan. He bought time on local TV. And on TV, Charles Brandenburg called for acts of revengeance against elected officials. He said revengeance, which isn't a word in the English language, but he called for acts of revengeance against elected officials. And he was arrested because he called for violence against elected officials on TV. And then he took it to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, oh, well, he didn't call for a specific act against a specific official, so that's free speech. And they let him off. Now, that's wild. I don't know any country in the world where you can get on television and call for violence against elected officials. But in the 1960s, the USA was so stable and there was such a prosperous economy, there was a feeling that, okay, we can lift the constraints. Well, you'll notice that as the USA has gotten less stable over the last couple decades, and since 9/11, that things have gotten a lot more restricted. A lot of this terrorism legislation is very selective, very, very selective, right? There's the case of the Holy Land Foundation. This was a group of Muslims in Texas, and they were arrested after 9/11 for aiding terrorists. And it was because they had a soup kitchen in Palestine that they were raising money for. And during the trial, they could not name a single terrorist that the Holy Land Foundation had given money to. But it was just hypothetically, well, possibly some terrorist could have gone here, and they locked these people up for decades, right?
Wow.
And these things happen. So the USA, and especially after January 6th, you see they're all calling for all kinds of sweeping legislation right now. They want a big crackdown.
Yep.
AOC wants the media to be regulated so no conspiracy theories can be promoted.
Yep.
As the USA is becoming less stable, it's becoming more authoritarian. This kind of fits the rule. And the problem is that we have all been taught to frame these things in a moralistic or ethical tone. There's good countries that have freedom. There's bad countries that don't. And that is not how human history works. I mean, no one talked about human rights or freedom of speech or freedom of association until like the 1400s in Europe. And were people just evil until then? For all the thousands of years humans have been around, we were just evil until then. And then somebody in Europe in the 1400s, John Locke or whoever, suddenly got this idea, hey, we should give people freedom. And everyone thought it was great, and we've been free ever since. That's ridiculous, right? That you couldn't have freedom in a medieval society. You couldn't have freedom in ancient Egypt because at that level of productivity, at that level of economic development, you necessitate authoritarianism. And when you separate the concept of human rights from economics and you make it just this abstract moral concept, you're out of touch with reality. And a lot of what Joe Biden, a lot of his rhetoric about autocracy and freedom and democracy is based on these very, very liberal assumptions. This is the philosophy of liberalism that says that the individual comes above all else, right? And that we should break down society into atomized individuals, uphold the rights of the individual at the expense of all else. But I'll let you in on a dirty secret. Human beings are collective creatures by nature. All of human civilization for thousands and thousands of years has been human beings working together in groups to accomplish things, right? Human beings are not, tigers that go out on their own and are predators out in the wild. No, we've always functioned in groups, and human beings are collective by nature. But if you break people down into atomized individuals, then they become weaker and they become easier to control. And that's a lot of what the elite want to do. They want to create this illusion of freedom, this idea that we're all free, we're all individuals. Look, you got your Facebook, you got your Twitter, you're an individual. No one can tell you what to do. But at the end of the day, you're on your own. You're not part of a collective. You don't identify with any organization, with any country, with any group. You're all on your own, and they can roll right over you. And that's what people don't understand. The more individualized, the more broken apart society becomes, the more easy it is to crush people.
I fully agree. I want to ask you one more question about foreign policy and global politics before we jump to something else. But I just want to remind everyone, if you're in chat right now, we got we got 1,000 people watching right now. So it's good to have all of you here. Thank you so much for being here. If you're watching, drop a like. If you're watching on YouTube, it helps us boost in the algorithm. Mods, please spam Caleb's links in the chat. I encourage everyone to go follow Caleb, follow his work. You can catch his almost nightly, I believe, live streams on YouTube as well. He's an author, journalist. You can find his books, and I believe you're working on a new book, right?
Well, there's a new short little pamphlet that just came out that kind of explains the beliefs of the Center for Political Innovation. It's called The Ideological Foundations of the City Building Tendency. Kind of a mouthful title there, but it's available. It just came out last week, so you can check it out.
Exciting.
It's a short little pamphlet. Yeah.
Congrats. Yeah. So I wanted to focus on everything that's going on with Russia right now in Ukraine, right? Because you turn on CNN, you turn on MSNBC, you turn on, maybe you're on YouTube, you turn on the Young Turks. You're going to hear the same exact thing. You're going to hear the same exact thing from all of the major liberal outlets right now, that Russia is about to invade Ukraine, and we should all be very frightened and support, the possible deployment of more of our brothers and sisters in the U.S., our troops, to go and fight this hypothetical war that's not happening between Russia and Ukraine. If you could, and you've done an incredible job of breaking down, I've played some of your clips on my streams from my community here. I think there should be a bipartisan outrage to what is happening right now with the Biden administration and Antony Blinken at the State Department crafting this narrative about Russia invading Ukraine. If you could break down what's really happening and what the deeper motives are here.
All right. So the allegation, which I can't confirm because I'm not in Russia, is that supposedly Russia has mobilized a lot of troops inside of Russia. Okay, that's within Russia's borders. There's a lot of troops that have been assembled inside of Russia. But let's think about this for a minute, right? So Ukraine is on the border of Russia. In 2014, the USA toppled the elected government of Ukraine, installed a fanatical anti-Russian regime in Kiev. And then the people in the eastern regions are upset. They're tearing down the World War II memorials. They've got, an actual Nazi battalion called the Avaz Battalion so Russia's obviously not happy about that. Meanwhile, there's another country on Russia's border called Belarus, and they had an election, and the USA didn't like the fact that Lukashenko got reelected. So that country was torn apart into chaos and violence and instability, and U.S. NGOs were helping destabilize that country. That's another country right on their border. And then you got Kazakhstan, another country where there was some protests and instability, and we find out, the United States has been involved, and there's been unrest and chaos, and that's another country right on Russia's border. Now, if you're Russia and one country on your border is thrown into chaos, And then another country on your border is thrown into chaos. And then another country in your border is thrown into chaos. You think they might like get some troops together to make sure none of that chaos like flows over their border? I mean, it's just kind of common sense, right? I mean, if
Yes.
Mexico were thrown into chaos and then Canada were thrown into chaos, you think we might be like getting soldiers ready, possibly, to deal with that? And would that be a violation of Mexico's sovereignty if we did that? Would that be a violation of Canada's sovereignty if we did that? I mean, this is pretty bizarre. On top of that, Russia has said repeatedly that they don't want there to be lethal weapons deployed to Ukraine right on their border. This government, this fanatical government that hates Russia, that is tearing down World War II memorials, that has Nazi fighting forces, the idea of giving them lethal weapons, the idea of them joining NATO and like hosting NATO troops is something they say is a red line. They want a security guarantee against that kind of thing. So the United States has been sending lethal weapons to Ukraine, Javelin anti-tank missiles, all kinds of fighter helicopters, etc. And then they're making all this noise like, oh, Russia's about to invade. Russia's about to invade. Russia has said over and over again they have no intention of invading. However, if you cross their red lines and start deploying weapons and missiles, and you start, they may at that point have to respond. So it's like they're creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, if you got to think about it, imagine that Russia was sending all kinds of weapons and missiles into Mexico and giving them to like neo-Nazi extremist groups who say their goal is to destroy the United States, because these Ukrainian extremists, they say their goal is to destroy Russia. They want to kill Russians, etc. And Russia were just deploying all kinds of weapons into Mexico. Do you think we wouldn't, as the United States, be like, hey, you got to stop this, Russia? Of course we would, right?
Exactly.
It's really bizarre. And then so it's pretty clear the United States wants Russia to invade Ukraine. They're trying to provoke it with everything they possibly can. And Russia is standing there going, we're not going to invade Ukraine, but can you stop doing all these things that are clearly designed to provoke us to do that?
Yes.
What scared me so much is mainstream media, when they talk about this, they don't seem to like realize what they're getting into. Like, war with Russia is not a joke, okay? Like, Russia's got nuclear weapons. Like, that's World War III. That's Armageddon, all right? That they keep playing up, and it's like the media is more pro-war than Biden is. I mean, they just are demanding of Biden, what are you doing? You're got to be harder on Russia. And it's like, do you realize the implications of going to war with Russia? The USA going to war with Russia is a nightmare. This is like a new Cuban Missile Crisis that's happening here. And instead of our media going, oh my God, the world's in danger, like they did during the original Cuban Missile Crisis, they're going to Biden and demanding that he be more hostile. Why are you jumping through hoops for Russia? I mean, I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it's shocking to me. The media has become the pro-war lobby group.
Yes, and unfortunately, in the same regard, that I always discuss on in this channel with the supposed squad, the progressives that are supposed to be combating the establishment policies of both the DNC and the GOP, because there are corrupt actors in both, camps. Obviously, it's basically it's just different sides of the same coin, I think. And the squad, the progressives, they ran for Congress saying, oh, we're going to change the system. We're going to fight for, the working families of this country. Now they're going out on MSNBC and CNN and with all of these same pro-war talking points surrounding Russia, when they should be the main ones calling out the hypocrisy, the fact that the U.S. is sending lethal aid to Ukraine, the fact that the U.S. is training Ukrainian special ops, the fact that we are keeping people on reserve deployment, for potentially being deployed to Ukraine. The list goes on. They should be calling out the fact that Zelensky is now going out and saying like, we don't think that they're going to invade us. We don't think Russia's going to invade us.
President of Ukraine is accusing Biden of overplaying this, right? And if you look at how much the Germans are not on board with this, the head of the German Navy actually quit. He quit. Like,
wow.
The head of the German Navy stepped down last week over this stuff, right? Wow. The French are not really excited about this. And now the actual Ukrainian president is not on board. It's like Joe Biden and the mainstream media of the United States are determined to keep this going, when it seems like everybody is at this point saying, can you cut it out? Like, we really don't want to have a new world war. Can you just cut it out? Croatia has said they will quit NATO. They will quit NATO. They will pull all their troops out of NATO if a fight breaks out in Ukraine. So it's like nobody wants this except for Joe Biden and the heads of CNN.
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting that Germany and I hadn't heard that about Croatia, but France specifically because Macron's the president, I believe now of the EU, and it's really just the UK and the US that are pushing all this garbage.
Yeah.
What do you think this says about and maybe people aren't familiar with these terms, but I refer to them a lot. The age of multipolarity that we are moving into right now, because for years, for decades, we've had the U.S. that is basically just dictated global, politics and policy. We refer to this as the age of like unipolarity with the U.S. at the helm. Squashing whoever they want and uplifting whoever they see as being a puppet of what they want on the global stage. What do you think this says about Russia really drawing a line in the sand on this issue and holding to it? Surrounding the age of multipolarity and rising powers such as Russia and China that are beginning to just stop the senseless U.S. imperialism and really not kill this thing in its cradle, but as the U.S. foreign policy agenda moves to hybrid warfare, sanctions, coups, regime change, in a much more drastic fashion than we've ever seen before, moving away from the troops on the ground, more than we've ever seen before to this hybrid warfare. What do you think this all says about that?
Well, I mean, the face of global politics is changing, and the face of the global economy is changing. And that's what's really underlying all of this. The price of natural gas is the highest it has been in a really long time.
Hmm.
There's a cold winter going on in Europe, and heating your home in Europe is really expensive. And these natural gas and oil companies in the United States, these energy giants, ExxonMobil, BP, Shell, Chevron, they are making a killing right now. They are making a huge amount of money. And there's one thing that could really change that, and that's if Russia is able to start selling more natural gas to Europe. There's a natural gas pipeline that's been built to Germany called the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, and it's not turned on yet. It's finished, it's built, but they won't turn it on. And Gazprom, the state run natural gas company of Russia, is ready to start selling natural gas to Europe. And if Russia is able to start selling natural gas to Europe, the price of natural gas goes down and the gouging party is over. And these big natural gas companies that are making a killing right now off of the high price of natural gas because of the cold winter, because of the supply chain issues and the increased demand from the pandemic, they're going to lose out. And I think that what's going on here is that there has just been a memo sent out: keep hostility to Russia as long as possible so that these big natural gas companies can just rake in more and more money. And that's what's going on. They are making a killing right now, and they don't want Russia to ruin the party. Russia is a major oil exporting country, and it's a major natural gas exporting company. And Wall Street doesn't like that competition. So if they can create a political situation where countries can't, they feel like they can't buy from Russia because it's a competitor, that will increase their profits. That will ensure their dominance.
Hmm.
And they don't like, in the 1990s, when Russia was deeply impoverished, the fall of the Soviet Union just ruined the country economically. U.S. relations with Russia were good. The USA loved Boris Yeltsin. Bill Clinton loved Yeltsin. They went over there. They were great. But when Putin got in and he fixed Russia's economy by recentering it around Gazprom and Rosneft, two state-controlled energy companies, and Russia started rebuilding itself and rebuilding its industries and becoming a more functional country and raising people out of poverty and getting back to where they had been. At that point, all of a sudden, Russia was the enemy again because they were a competitor. Wall Street and the Pentagon, they want the world to be poor, impoverished, captive markets. They don't like it when countries pull themselves up and start making their own steel, start making their own oil, start making their own cell phones. They don't like that. They want the world to be poor and dependent on them. That's what they want. They don't like competitors. All the countries the USA has invaded mostly have been oil exporting countries that were competitors with Wall Street. Libya was the top oil exporting country in Africa before the NATO intervention. And they were bombed and destroyed. The economy in Libya was so good, people from all over Africa were trying to get into Libya to get
Hmm.
jobs, to get some of
Yep.
that oil money. And now, thanks to NATO and capitalism, Libya has been bombed to smithereens and destroyed. And at this point, people are trying to flee Libya on rafts. They're drowning in the Mediterranean trying to get out. Libya was the top oil exporting country. Iraq was a major oil exporting country. and it's been bombed, and it's had years of chaos and instability. Their oil exports are about 10% of what they were under Saddam Hussein, under the Ba'athist government of Iraq, right? Venezuela is targeted by the United States, a major oil exporting country. Iran is targeted by the United States, a major oil exporting country. The enemies of the United States tend to be countries that are competitors, specifically on the oil and natural gas markets. But I mean, with China, it's steel, it's cell phones. Wall Street wants a monopoly. It wants the whole world to be captive markets that are dependent on them. And many countries around the world are simply not going to accept that. And this kind of gets back to what we were talking about before, about growth and, poverty and socialism. Because at the end of the day, a lot of this Malthusian eco stuff that's being put out by the synthetic left, this idea that the problem with, climate change is people just have too much stuff. We want everyone to be poorer, right? A lot of that is coming from the ultra rich.
Yes,
it's like
yes.
King of the mountain. They're already at the top of the mountain, and they say, all right, game over. We won. Growth must stop. Countries must remain in poverty. Why? Because we're at the top of the mountain. We won, and so the world just needs to stay the way it is. Sorry, guys, climate change. Y'all just got to stay poor because we're already at the top of the mountain. That's what Wall Street is saying. But at the end of the day, a lot of countries are saying, no, we are going to improve our living standards. We are going to raise out of poverty. We're going to work with African countries to develop their industries, et cetera, and that they're going to continue growing. And, yes, there's a problem with climate change. The solution is to get beyond fossil fuels, fusion energy. That's why China is putting so much into fusion energy, right? Investing in a higher mode than fossil fuels. Windmills are nice, right? They're nice. Solar panels are nice, but they're not a higher mode. They're producing less energy, not more, right? If you want to get off of fossil fuels, you need to develop a better mode of energy. And China has put a huge amount of money into their artificial suns and in their fusion energy research, because that's the hope for getting us beyond fossil fuels. That's the hope to getting us to a more sustainable fuel level. And our leaders here in the United States, they think the answer to climate change is reducing consumption, making everyone poorer, decreasing the population. That's not how human beings work. Human beings are constantly getting to a higher stage. We're constantly wanting more than we had before. We want our kids and the next generation to have a better life than we had. That's the nature of human beings, right? Ants have been making their ant farms the same way for millions of years. Beavers have been building their beaver dams the same way for millions of years. But in just 9,000 years, human beings have gone from hunter-gatherers in the woods to space travel and iPhones. And this is just the beginning. Human beings are endowed with a special creative power that enables them to do massive, amazing things. And I don't think that ability to advance, that can just be turned off. It's not going to work. So if you want to solve environmental problems, you need to be supporting fusion energy.
Yes.
One thing that I have called for in the Center for Political Innovation, we're developing our formal proposal, is wouldn't it be great if all the major countries in the world, the United States, Russia, China, India, Japan, all these countries brought all their fusion energy scientists together in one single facility and worked together to solve the problem of fusion energy and get humanity off of fossil fuels. One emergency crash program, a new United Nations for scientists to combine their efforts, to be given all the funding they need, all the energy to get us beyond fossil fuels. It would be called Fusion City. And wouldn't it be great if in the heartland of America, in Kansas or Nebraska, we built this huge international facility where Chinese scientists and Russian scientists and Indian scientists and South African scientists all came together in an emergency, unified, global effort to get fusion energy. And when they worked together, when fusion energy was finally discovered, it would then be the property of all humanity. It wouldn't belong to China. It wouldn't belong to Russia. It wouldn't belong just to the United States. All of humanity would be able to share in the fruits of fusion energy. Fusion City, that is our vision for getting beyond the climate crisis, solving the energy problem. And China, if you look at what they're doing with their artificial suns, they know how important fusion energy is. Putin has called for a global united effort around fusion energy. And that is a serious program around climate change and the problems there. Fusion City is the answer. So if we want to solve the climate problems, we got to build Fusion City, and we got to build it now.
But Caleb, what about making money off of this? And isn't that the end goal? We need to make money off of this somehow.
Well, think about how much money would be made from fusion energy. I'm
Yeah,
serious.
no. Yeah.
But Wall Street, is largely oil street, and they would be out of business. So, the Wall Street bankers probably don't want it. But in terms of average people across the planet with fusion energy, with that much energy being produced that efficiently, the amount of ability of human beings to get wealthy and start their own businesses, raise living standards would astoundingly go up. So there you
Yes.
go.
I don't want to keep you too long. We've been going for about an hour, but I have one more thing that I want to discuss here. The first time you came on my show, we talked about it was just a general conversation, I think, about like communism or something like that. I think is what generally we were talking about. And you discussed that, in an effort to begin, what would be a socialist project here in the United States, some of the things that we would need to bring to the table for the American people would be a mass infrastructure program, declaring major energy resources as public commodities. Banking needs to be in the hands of the state. Economic Bill of Rights, these sorts of things, all great ideas that I'm sure people who are right, left, center, wherever on the political spectrum here in the United States, so long as they're not on the top and they, are more so on the bottom, which I think the vast majority of the people in this country are. You go on the streets in downtown Los Angeles, where I live, sometimes it feels like there's more people living on the streets than there are in buildings like this. So, as we move towards this, and I think it's just going to be happening more and more because, as you just discussed and brought up, we are moving into this age of multipolarity. The American empire is falling, I guess you could say. I mean, it's still doing a lot of damage globally, but it's not what it used to be, and it's being balanced out in some aspects by Russia and China and their unifications with official state enemies of the United States all across the globe. Do you have hope in like electoral strategy for this? Do you have hope in just like a groundswell of people's movement for this? Do you think that in some ways the response to establishment COVID policies might be putting us on a launch pad to an agenda like this, because I do think we're having a major political realignment in this country. I do think these establishment COVID policies have caused people to recognize that we all got more in common with each other than we think. What do you think about this? What do you think about the future of this? And maybe just touch on these ideas. We haven't talked about them since the first time you came on the broadcast. And I mean, they're great. I think real American patriots, real fucking Chads like Henry Carey would think these things are great. He did think these things were great. Dictator of Louisiana, Huey Long, he thought these things were great. What do you think about the future of these ideas?
Well, the only hope is that those of us who believe in socialism and Marxism, we must learn to love the American people. If we want to lead the country, if we want to actually transition the country towards socialism and lead it, we must love the American people, all the American people, Black, white, Asian, Arab, Latino, Californians, Midwesterners, Southerners, New Englanders. We must learn to love the American people. And we must love them so much and have such a deep connection with them that we can get them to understand their own interests. And you talked about being on the streets of Los Angeles and seeing all the homeless folks and the situation out there. And it can be hard to love the American people. It can be hard to love people who would live in a society that would let people be homeless like that. It can be hard to love people that have been taken in by the foreign policy lies that justify these wars. But we've got to learn to love the American people. And we have got to get the American people to understand that socialism is not their enemy. Socialism is not about making their life worse. Socialism is about building a better life for the country by mobilizing and freeing the country from the free market, open international system and rebuilding the country with rational socialist planning of the economy. We have got to get the average working class Americans all throughout the country, up and down the country, to understand that we are their friends, that we have their interests at heart, and that we are not trying to make their lives worse. And if we can do that, and if we can change the face of socialism and not have socialism be associated with the toxic, middle class, destructive, woke, synthetic left that is just so toxic and destructive, if we can have socialism become associated with loving the country, loving communities, building a better life, we can do that. The options are very, very big. We can build community organizations. We can start working together. I think people could be elected to office very easily. I think community groups could be built, and I think that we could start to change the course of history. But it requires a change in how we view the American people, because most of the people nowadays that call themselves socialists or Marxists, they hate average Americans. It's simply an
Yes.
expression of their
Yes.
political alienation. And that has no political future, right? Expressing
No.
your rage and alienation. The elites love that, though. They would like there to be more instability in the country. They'd like the country to be more polarized and divided so they can screw over all of us. But if we have a vision for bringing people together to demand a government of action that would fight for working families, we could really get beyond this and do some really good, amazing things.
I wholeheartedly agree. Caleb, thank you so much for coming on the show. Mods, again, please spam Caleb's links, YouTube, website, Twitter, all these things in the YouTube and Twitch chat. Everyone go follow Caleb, check out his work. Does great live streams on YouTube almost every day. Caleb, any works or projects or events, any platforms you want to shout out?
Well, no, but I will say that I love how you drop kicked Sam Cedar. That was pretty cool. That was great. Keep doing that. I love to see you pick these guys on because they are pretty unbelievable.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you stepping up to the plate and calling them out on their nonsense. You did your homework on that debate. Sam Cedar was expecting to have a philosophical conversation with you about what's right and what's wrong and who should we support. You came armed with facts. You were like a jury trial prosecutor. You came in there with dates and facts and votes to call him out on. And he was reduced to, I don't care. I don't care. I don't care. I mean, you nailed it. And keep doing that. You're a great representative for the kind of politics we need if we're going to save the country from this crisis.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I had a lot of fun with it, and definitely more to come.
Excellent.
All right. Caleb, you have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'm sure we'll talk again soon.
Sure thing.
All right. Bye.